Welcome back to the Star Wars News Net Timeline Show. My name is Tyler, and I'm joined always by Ryan Miller. Ryan,
What's going on,
this
guys?
is episode 4 now of
Yeah.
the Timeline Show.
Cooking right
We're
along.
hanging in there in the year 382 BBY, and
Still
it's a
there.
good time. We absolutely I love the High Republic. I love everything about that. And this week we're talking about Quest of the Hidden City.
That's right.
This is a book by George Mann, who has written plenty of Star Wars at this point.
Great
And we
author
just
too, by the
got
way.
done. Yeah, we just got done reading his Eye of Darkness that came out, the first adult novel for Phase 3. So that was fun. And this book came out in November of 2022, and honestly, this was like a refreshing read for me. I read it this week. I know that you had read it already, and this was my first time jumping into it. I just decided to plow through it, and I actually finished it a couple hours before we recorded this. I did a little 2-hour just bender and finished the last like 100 pages or whatever, 150 pages, and just finished it up. But it was a fun book to read.
It was.
And so for those that are not familiar with some of the characters that we're going to talk about, okay, this is where we're introduced to two Jedi that I was actually pretty fond of after reading this. All I had read was a little short story with the two of them from Tales of Light and Life that I really adored. And getting to dive deep into these characters here and their relationship was great. So if you want to put Salandra and Rupert up. So we have Salandra who is right there on the left. She is one of the most unique Jedi in terms of her choice of weaponry. And then we have Rupert right there, who has two lightsabers. She wields two lightsabers, which, anytime someone wields like dual lightsabers, I just feel like that's
it seems to happen a lot in High Republic too.
It's just such an open, free-flowing environment for the Jedi to be in, much more so than obviously the prequel era. And so the cool thing about Salandra's show, for those of you who are not familiar with her, is she carries a shield on her back that gets powered up. And I don't know what the correct term is, Brian, for like what it's powered by, but
I don't know.
It's kind of like, I don't know, it kind of gives vibes of like the shields that the Gungans use in the prequels, but I know it has like, it powers on the perimeter of it, so she can like, strike with it if she needs to.
Captain America style. Yeah.
Yes, and she does that a few times in the book. And the great thing about Salandra is that she really embodies what the Jedi are supposed to be with this shield. It's like the metaphor that is used to describe what the Jedi are supposed to be. And her Padawan Rupert learns that through this book, that the Jedi are meant to be the shield for the people. They're not there to seek adventure. They're not there to seek glory or even honor for themselves. They're there to serve and shield, regular people. Where they go, they need help. It's like the Ahsoka line from Clone Wars. Like, in my life, whenever someone needs help, like, you help them. And I think Salandra really embodies what that means for the Jedi. So you mentioned how much you love Salandra to me, both before and just now. So give us like a quick dive into like why you love this character so much.
She's so much different than any other Jedi that we're really used to. And as Phase 2 goes on and you get more and more of her, especially with Battle of Jeddah and especially with the very last book, I believe it's Path of Vengeance is the last one, if I'm not mistaken. Yes. There's a lot there that to really unpack, and there's a really great short story, and we'll talk about it later on in Tales of Light and Life with her and Rupert when Rupert's getting ready to become a Jedi Knight. And there's great stories surrounding her with this shield, and it gives a little more backstory to it. But the shield is what makes her stand apart a little bit. She carries a lightsaber. I don't know if you guys saw in the picture, if you guys are watching the video version of this, she does have a lightsaber. But she doesn't focus on using it as much as, other Jedi do. She focuses on using that shield. And there's a great lesson in that. And you come to find out later on that the shield's been passed down, through generations of, or I should say iterations of master to apprentice to apprentice to apprentice to apprentice. And so it's really a cool concept. And just as a character in general, her mentality of just trying to protect people more than anything, that's when you think peacekeeper, that's what you think, just protection. It's so much different than anything the other Jedi do. The lightsaber
Right.
is, you know, defensive and offensive. That shield is mainly defensive, and the fact that she
Mhm.
resorts to her lightsaber as a last resort, that just says a lot about her character. And I think she's very unique, and I really like the way she stands out.
It's pretty incredible how even when they were faced in danger, sometimes her first instinct isn't to reach for her lightsaber to ignite it. Her first thing that she
Mhm.
does is she grabs the shield because it's very clear. She says, "I am here to protect. I'm here to defend. The Jedi use the Force for defense, never attack," as Yoda said. And so it's just pretty incredible that we have a character who and embodies that in such a direct way, and it doesn't feel like it's too on the nose or
Yeah,
forced. It feels very unique
natural.
even
Yeah.
amongst the Jedi, and it's like a natural thing, like you said. And so the two of them are in this book responding to, I guess it's a distress call in a
Hmm.
sense from another Pathfinder team. These Pathfinder teams are teams of Jedi and then other members of the Republic who are, venturing out into the outer rim in order to explore new planets and new people, new civilizations, to learn about them, invite them into the Republic if the time comes, but mostly just to extend and start relationships with new people. And one of these Pathfinder teams was calling for help, and Salandra and Rupert and a few other members of their crew, of course, are going to go help them. And Brian, please tell us about their first interactions with the Catacoot people
Is that
and
how you pronounce it?
describe. Is it like it's
I think
K
that's how you
A
pronounce it. Yeah.
Katie Coot or
I
Catacoot?
never could pronounce it. Yeah.
It's
Uh,
Katikoot. So I was saying Catacook or Catacoot in
yeah.
my
Catacoot.
yeah,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
or I could see it like Catacoot, Katie
Hmm.
Coot. It's fun to
Well,
say, but this it's describe paint a picture for the audience of what these, because they are very unique species in
they
Star
are,
Wars that we were
and I
introduced to.
love them. I think they're absolutely awesome. They're basically big sentient bats. Is basically what I gathered from it.
Not tiny
And
bats. These are big, giant,
huge bats.
like
Yeah, like Man Bat. If you guys are DC fans, Man Bat, like he's, uh, but they live underground in this city, and that's basically where the title of the book comes from, Quest for the Hidden City. They live in this underground city, um, and they've got a civilization under there. The Jedi have a hard time finding this city at first, because the distress call is actually coming from the city itself, and they have no idea where it's at. And their first encounter with one of these creatures is kind of cool the way it was written, because Rupert keeps it. Doesn't she see one up on a cliffside, if I remember right,
mhm.
kind of watching them? And so Solandra gets her to flank it, and catches it by surprise. Um, but they're basically big bat creatures. I think they're awesome, dude. Like I said last week, because you hadn't read the book yet last week.
Right.
Like I told you, I really thought that was a nice touch. I mean, you've got some of the creatures, like the Chadra fan, that kind of look like bats.
Mhm.
But this is like full on bat creature. And honestly, I didn't even really know what they look like until I got to the page in the book, because this book does have some illustrations in it also,
Yes.
about what some of them look like. But they're freaking sick, dude.
And so their first interaction is they're introduced with these people and they're trying to talk to them. And then they realize, oh, we're greatly outnumbered
Yeah,
here, as all of a sudden they just see others circling around and, engulfing them. But fortunately, they're able to establish a, decent relationship, first impression. They get invited into the city. And based
yeah,
off of the barren land that they are on at the surface, they're assuming that this culture and this society is going to be pretty minimalistic or pretty
primitive.
less, pretty primitive
Yeah,
from what they, are used to on, say, like Coruscant or something.
right.
They are vastly mistaken when they enter into a society that, in some ways, is even more advanced and technologically superior and advanced than anything that they have encountered before. And
Yeah,
they're wondering, just how is it possible that this society is able to, one, have built this, and two, have the governmental, societal structures in place to maintain it and protect it and
right.
sustain it. And I think it's just fascinating talking about their societal structure, and they end up meeting Mitik's father. Mitik is like the first of the Kataku people that they meet.
Hmm.
And there they meet the fire to learn what happened to the Jedi Pathfinder team that was there before, and ultimately get launched onto into their mission that they
Right.
take under.
Rescue mission.
That's
Yeah.
so that's where they learn that the Kataku people's planet of, I believe it's called like Autobos or something like that.
Yeah.
It's like Autobos, and they have a sister planet called Gloam or
Gloam. Yeah.
Gloomomos. It's
Gloam.
Gloam.
I think it's Gloam. Yeah.
Mhm.
It's
Yes, and
Gloam.
yes, so I
Gloam.
would assume it's Gloam. And basically, for thousands of years, the Kataku people have been mining these minerals from Gloam in order to power this, society that they have built. What they have now realized, though, is that they have completely ravaged the atmosphere and the nature of the other planet to where the planet is dying.
Hmm.
But the very thing that they have been mining and has created this grand society that they have is the same thing that's now killing their own society. Their people are starting to get sick from the mines. They're running out of power, that no one is going over to the other planet because miners are disappearing. There's ancient stories of these monsters that are going to come out and kill them, and people are disappearing, people are dying, people are getting sick. And so now they have a very serious problem. It is a lack of power. They have just enough power to last just a few more weeks, and they are seeking aid from the Republic for help because they need, an alternative clean energy source in order to sustain their society. And what's interesting is the people aren't panicking. They are acting like nothing is wrong. And they're like, what is going on? We are doomed in a matter of weeks if we don't have this solved. And the reason that it hasn't been solved yet and the Republic hasn't been able to come in is because of the war that's going on with Aram and Arano, which we
Yep.
have talked about in previous shows. And so it all interconnects together. So what was your first impression of the Catacomb society, and then just the general problem of like, okay, we have a sister planet, we have
Hmm.
stripped it barren, but now there's problems, and now our own society is crumbling because of our own negligence for thousands of years.
Right. It it's kind of like, people are worried about our planet Earth, right? That we're destroying it and we don't have anywhere else to go. In this case, they've destroyed a different planet in order
Mhm.
to power their own. Um, but yeah, it's an interesting society and it's an interesting hierarchy, like how they've made everything and how everything is ran. You're right. Nobody seems to really care at all that they're running out of a power source that they've been using for generations, and
Mhm.
and it it it's interesting how nobody's really worried about it, yet they still reach out to the Republic for help.
Right.
I thought that was kind of interesting. But yeah, the thing that caught me off guard the most was that nobody even really cares, and they've really cut anybody off from going to the planet at all.
Mhm. Well,
And
no
so
one's even willing to go anymore
yeah,
because
yeah,
of the terrors that they've
right,
encountered.
yeah, and once you find out what these terrors are, which we'll talk about here in a minute, here in a little bit, it the whole story starts to come
Mhm.
full circle, and the whole story starts to come out. But yeah, it's just there was so much mystery surrounding it,
Mhm.
and it kind of had um, so dare I say it had kind of like a Wakanda feel to it,
Right.
to the society. You know
Like,
how
it's like
it's
the
so much.
hidden grand
Yes, very advanced,
society.
and yeah, so that's kind of the vibe I was getting. It was kind of a Wakanda feel to it.
Mhm, absolutely. And the interesting thing is these giant bats, but they don't have the ability to fly.
Right.
They're grounded. They have these giant wings, these giant talons, but they're grounded. They cannot fly. They've been taught that for thousands of years they've simply originated on Autobos, this planet. That's where they came
Yeah.
from, and they've just mined glow. That's what they've always known.
Yep.
And so they find out that the Jedi Pathfinder team, I believe I called him Roke, is the other Jedi's name. It's ROK.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's Roke or Rock. I called him
I
Roke
called
just
him
so I
Rock.
wouldn't call him
Yeah.
Rock.
Yeah.
So Roke Rock, he and his Padawan Malik, they were
Hmm.
there with some other Pathfinder teams, and they were there with Rillik, who is a Katakuk, uh, Katakut, who was leading them over there to try to discover if there was anything salvageable from the planet,
Right.
They were trying to recover some last little minerals to get them by for the next, few weeks until the Republic can provide clean energy sources, and almost even do an investigation of what's going on here. So Salandra and Rupert find this out, and they're saying, all right, we're going to go to Gloam, and we're going to take Rillick with us. He's the only survivor from that trip. We're going to take him with us, with our crew, and we are going to go and discover what has happened to the Jedi, what has happened to the other members of the team, see if we can do a rescue mission, but also figure out what is salvageable from Gloam.
Right.
And while that's going on, we're also every once in a while getting a brief chapter with Das and Spence, who are a father-son duo.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
Yes, and they're hyperspace lane prospectors, and they just crash landed there because, and this is kind of how it all connects. They were working with Sunshine Dobbs, who is kind of the crook that's in line with the path of the open hand. He took them to Planet X, which was the Paradise Planet, and as they were trying to discover it. And so they've been to Planet X, which is the home world of the nameless creatures. It's just crazy how it all connects together. But they're crash landing this planet, fighting for their lives against these mythical monsters, which are in fact real. And we don't know what those are, although I don't know why you kind of had a feeling what those were going to be very, very quickly
together. Yeah.
And so they get to the planet, and describe to me kind of your first thoughts on both Dawson and Spence and how that kind of connects together, but also your first thoughts on when they get to Gloam, what that experience is like for them, because it's described as just this crazy swirling atmosphere of destruction.
It almost, I was kind of picturing, if you've seen the original Matrix movie, kind of like what Earth looked like once the machines took over and blackened, when they blackened the sky. That's kind of what I was picturing. This father and son duo, I called him Das. Is it Doss or Das?
Das.
I said Das. Yeah, it's DASS. I called him Das. He ends up popping up in the book later on, Quest for Planet X, which has a direct tie back to this book and a lot of other stuff that was going on in one of the other High Republic novels for this phase. So it all does tie together. There's more going on behind the scenes with these two. You find out later what was happening at this point, and why they were on this planet. I really like these two characters a lot. His dad is being very protective of him, and trying to keep him safe on this planet with these creatures. They're trying to build this transmitter to try to put out a distress beacon. I thought they were really interesting, especially when Das starts to kind of take the lead and goes against his father's wishes to go out to try to get some of these parts for this transmitter, or to get the transmitter itself. And as a father myself, my son, I'm obviously, I love my son, but to me he's the greatest kid on the face of the planet, and it's easy to put myself and him in those shoes to kind of feel what would be going on with him. And I connected a lot more with him by doing that. Emotionally, I could kind of feel what his dad was feeling, going through a lot of this stuff and seeing Das do what he was doing. But yeah, this planet is just, it's just basically a hellscape, and just blackened skies, like you said, and it's very reminiscent of the Matrix, Earth on the surface of the planet. But yeah, it kind of had this horror kind of feel to it a little bit also.
In the child's novel, it was like the middle grade novel, and it's like a little scary. You have monsters, this barren wasteland environment, this desolate place of despair, and they land on the planet, and immediately Rupert feels something with the Force calling out to her. And I love the way that Rupert sees things in the Force. I love it when they get into how each Jedi perceives the Force differently.
Love that in the High Republic.
Yes.
Love that.
And so Rupert sees the Force as just a bunch of radiant light, and each person, each organism has a very distinct color, and there's distinct like a distinct brightness or radiance to them. There's variance within it. And so people that she's seen before, like she recognizes colors. And so there's one thing that's calling out to her that she was like, this feels familiar, but it's completely, different. I've never felt this before. It's calling out to me. It needs our help. And so they split up, Rupert and Shalandra, they go one way. The other members of their team go the other. And as they're getting there, Rillick, who is the Katakut that has been there for a while, we learn that he is a traitor. Very quickly, we learn that he's a traitor. He is very sick with the quote unquote miner's curse,
Mhm.
which, for those of you curious about the miner's curse, let's just talk about it right now. Why not? So
Yeah,
this is where it gets a little trippy, people. This
a
is
little
where
weird.
if you love weird Star Wars, this is your time. This is the
I
moment
love
you're
this book.
gonna love. Brian loves this. I thought it was good. It was crazy. So these minerals that have been powering their society for years, thousands of years, that they have been mining, these minerals are like parasites, I guess, for lack of a better word, where if you spend too much time around them and mining them, they attach themselves to living hosts. They have very angry, I guess, vibes is the right way to say it, because the Jedi even sense anger and
Yeah,
hatred from them.
it's like the
And
slime in Ghostbusters 2. It's it's a lot like that.
yes. And so they attach themselves to these hosts and slowly take over the bloodstream and every part of the body and essentially turn them into zombies. They kill them, they turn them into zombies, where if you were to like slice off your hand, blood would no longer come out though. It would be like rocks. It would be the
Right,
minerals they're
the minerals.
reproducing inside of their host and can keep them alive indefinitely. That's their way of reproducing in a sense. And so Rillick has the miner's curse. So he knows he's doomed. And he knows that he has been, we learned that he's a traitor. He's been setting people up to die in order to try to get rich off of this, thinking this
Mhm.
is an incurable thing. And I'm just going to go out, on top.
Get as rich as I can and enjoy my time I got left.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so we find this out. And of course, that happens when everyone splits up and leaves him alone on the ship, which is one
Mhm.
other person. And Solandra and Rupert, they go off and they find Roke, who is alive, and they find an ancient Jedi temple that's been there for tens of thousands of years. And the other group goes to the ruins of the city and they discover these tapestries that kind of tell the story. Both groups kind of find these tapestries that tell the story of what really happened with the Katakut people. But this is where we first find out the monsters are ancient Katakut people that have
Yeah.
been transformed into these zombie bats. So, Brian, before we get into the ancient history of the Katakut people and the great lightsaber fights that go on in this book, give me your first impression of sentient, I guess not really sentient at this point, but like sentient
Living, parasitic.
living parasitic rocks taking over giant bats and turning them into zombies in Star
I
Wars.
love it. I love it, dude. It's so wild and weird. I love it so much. The Star Wars has always got to me when you're getting into weird stuff, I really like it
Yes.
because it's an entire galaxy of stuff. There's gonna be weird stuff out there that you don't understand and stuff you've never
Right.
seen before. And I love stuff like this. And just when they find the tapestries and they start going through, the history and it's revealed that these are the ancient, Catatook or
Mhm.
whatever, however you say it. And basically they left this planet to go to the one they're on because they ruined this when they went to that one. I loved it. I
Yeah.
was I saw it coming a little. It was a little predictable, to be honest.
Mhm.
But I really did like it a lot. And these things, the idea of gravel zombies. I could just see an arm getting cut off and gravel pouring out. I love the
Yeah.
idea of that. Especially later on when you start to see some of them actually transform when they're actually being infected. And I don't want to
Mhm.
say any names yet, but um it's really good, and just to die that way would be such a horrible death for it to start in
Oh
your
my
lungs the way
gosh.
that's
It was
basically like the miner's lung, the black lung on steroids. It's basically the black
horrible.
lung combined with the zombie virus, and just
And they're not able to, and like you lose control, like, and
yeah,
but you feel you're losing control. Like
you're
you
still yeah,
feel yourself losing, and there's nothing you
yeah,
can do. It's like I can't, my movements are slower. I can't
stiff and yeah,
function. And so the fascinating thing to me was when they found out the real history of their people.
yeah,
And they found out that the Catacombs actually originated on Gloam. That was their original home planet. It
Mhm.
wasn't
And
Autobots.
that some of them knew too.
Yes, and then some of them
Yeah,
knew this.
keeping it quiet.
And they found this out, and so that they originated there, that they used to be able to fly, that they created these like, vertical structures because they didn't need a horizontal plane because they could fly around. And this is part of what happened to them with these minerals over time. Like they've lost the ability to fly.
Yeah.
They lost this ability within themselves, and they lost a sense of what they had accomplished before. They didn't know their true history. And what they also discovered is that the ancient people have figured out that these minerals were infecting their own and turning them into these zombies. And there was a great struggle. They even found evidence of a Katakut Jedi from thousands of years ago, basically holding back this, horde of zombie bats.
Mhm.
And they had to flee the planet to Autobots, and they trapped these zombie bats in the ruins
Yeah.
of the temple. But it kind of gave me like Lord of the Rings vibes
Very
when they were
much.
saying how they're in the ruins of this, and they're literally in the
Mines of
ruins of
Moria.
mines. And
Yeah.
then like when they said the line Lord of the Rings, like the dwarves dug too greedily and too deep, and it's talking about how they unleashed these monsters because they, in
Very
their
similar.
greed, they kept digging too greedily and too deep. So I thought
Yeah.
that was kind of a fun little parallel
It
that I
was
was able to
great.
draw.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. The zombie virus is basically the Bell Rock of the Star Wars
Yes.
universe. I love it. Absolutely love it.
And so basically, Das and Spence are saved by members of the crew. They ultimately all kind of reunite at the end. And there's this epic lightsaber showdown where they're fighting these bats, and the sentient, like these zombie bats, can fly. So they're
Mhm.
flying. It's dark outside. You can't see anything. And I'm just imagining how terrifying that would be. And they were talking about the talons just being like so long. There are these 9-foot creatures just flying
Mhm.
around trying to kill you. The imagery in that book was one of my favorite little action sequences I think we've ever
It was
gotten in
pretty
a High
cool.
Republic book. And I'm curious, what did you think when Shalandra at one point took out her shield and started? This was not against the zombie best, this was against a different group of beasts, but
Mhm.
started using it as Captain America style, launching it
Yeah,
with
she
the
did.
force. She's like
Yeah,
using the
using the
force
force
to
to
launch the shield around. What did you think about that?
ricochet it, or it was awesome. And that's exactly what I was picturing was Captain America fighting somebody. That's the only thing I could, but it, as much as the shield is a defensive weapon, like I said, it's mainly defensive. It does still have an
Mhm.
offensive uh uh side to it. I thought it was great, and it was so versatile and showed how she thinks outside of the box from other Jedi.
Right.
Because Jedi would do the same thing with their lightsaber. They would just, and
Right.
throw, but to have that shield flying around, that was so unique and cool. I loved
Mhm.
it. And the whole fight with the Catatook, I guess, the bats, the whole fight with the bats inside the ruins when they're trying to escape. Um,
Mhm.
there's moments in there where it's pretty suspenseful.
Yes.
And people getting surrounded and fighting these things, especially Rupert getting surrounded, and when they finally get out of these ruins and they're still trying to escape these things and get off the planet. Yeah,
Mhm.
it's just an awesome fight. The fight you're talking about is when they come across the like almost like the giant tiger creature
Yes, it's right
that
before
was
they
stalking him.
find it's right
Yeah.
before they find Roke,
Yes.
and they Rock, and then they save him, and they get
Yeah.
reunited with everyone. And the thing that's cool about that is she's using it to not attack the creatures because she doesn't wanna harm them.
Right.
She's just trying to send a message that, "Hey, we're not lunch today."
Right.
So even that whole aspect of, like, "I'm not going to attack," like, it's still
Mhm.
defense, and she 'cause she you could have just used her lightsaber, whipped it around like you said,
Right.
and taking them
Yeah.
out. But she's like, nope, we're going to use the shield because once again, we're not trying to harm anything. We're just trying to survive, just like they
Yeah.
are. And when Rupert gets trapped and looks like she's gonna eat it, it was just a classic. Like I am one with the Force. The Force is with
Yeah.
me. Like they say it, in the book, and then she just basically closes her eyes and like fights blind. It just kind of like took me back to when Luke lowers the shield on the helmet
Yeah.
and blocks the blaster bolts on the board of the Falcon for the first time in A New Hope, and it's like just that coming of age moment for her. It was a much bigger moment than, Luke just blocked a couple blaster bolts. She's
Right.
fighting for her life, but it was like, you've taken your first steps into a larger world. Like
Yeah.
it just felt like that moment where
A
she
big
went
step of
from,
progress. Yeah.
yeah, like the moment where she went from kind of a wide-eyed Padawan to, you know, the makings of a seasoned Jedi Knight, like
Right.
your Jedi Knight. It was like that was one of those moments.
Yeah.
And then I love the moments in the High Republic because the Jedi are at their peak, and not a lot of people know about the Jedi and or have seen one or
Hmm.
interacted with one. There's only 10,000 or whatever
Yeah.
strong, and you hear like the awe in the voice of Das when he sees the light. It talks about it through his eyes when he's like, the Jedi are here, and he sees the lightsaber. He's like, the three lightsabers are, in the distance. And I just love the feeling it gets because it makes you feel like the Jedi are here, like they inspire
Yeah.
that hope and what everything that you want that's good about Star Wars that they inspire. And so in that moment, I want to know, like, were you ready to jump through the pages to go to Gloam and be with
No.
Death and take on the fight with the bats, or were you
No.
perfectly fine just reading what
I
happens?
was happy reading it. I didn't want to go. I'm a homebody, man. I stay home whenever I can.
You are not going to be being. You're saying a hyperspace lane prospector is not in your future.
No, ain't no way in hell. There's no way. Um, I no, I thought it was a great moment. It was very much a when those Jedi, and there's several moments in the High Republic where that happens,
Right.
where you kind of see the Jedi coming in from other people's point of view. Like you follow the Jedi through the book the same amount of time you do, but you see the
Mhm.
moment when they show up through somebody else's eyes, and
Right.
it's kind of cool the way they do that. There's even one of the stories in uh, Tales of Light and Life where the whole story is from this random no-name character's point of view,
Right.
and all of a sudden the Jedi
Oh,
just pop in at the very end, and it's like, oh hey, and matter of fact,
I
I'm pretty
love
sure
that
it was
story.
Rupert too, but
No,
yeah,
I don't.
was it,
It was. I think it was
or was
Keith.
it was, oh you're right,
It was
you're
Keith.
right, it was Keith, you're right.
Oh,
um
I
but but
love. I
but moments like
love
that
that
are
story.
so awesome how they do it, and it's kind of like this big uh Avengers Endgame reveal like moment where
Mm,
everybody comes in, at the last moment, and it's I like the way they do it because it makes the Jedi, especially with like uh 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 Light of the Jedi, the very first High
yes.
Republic
Yes.
novel
Yes.
we
Yes.
got, when all of the Jedi across the galaxy, are using the Force to try to move this debris out of the
Right.
way from these planets and stuff. And you kind of see it from people's point of view who don't use the Force, and they're
Mhm.
watching these Jedi do this, and it adds this like massive sense of wonder and mystery and accomplishment and like all these other attributes to the Jedi. It builds on the mythology of them because, like you said, not everybody has seen a Jedi. They're
Right.
just things of legend, basically.
Mhm.
In a galaxy of trillions and trillions of people, 10,000 ain't nothing. That's not even a point of a point of a point of a percent, and
Right.
so to to see that from somebody else's point of view, to realize they are real and they can do all the things that I've heard about them doing, and I'm witnessing it, and they're here to save me personally. It's a really cool way to write these stories and to do the reveals
Absolutely.
on them.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree. I get teary-eyed when I think of that Tales of Light and Life story with Keith because
Yeah,
it's just the
it's a
per
good story.
it's honestly the embodiment of Star Wars right there in just 12 pages. It's
Yeah.
about this group of people that honestly should be hopeless, but they're clinging to hope that someone
Hmm.
will come help them and someone will actually fight for them and help them fight for themselves because they're trying to stay on their ground. And then the Jedi actually come in. Well, we see.
Out
We're
of
gonna get into
nowhere.
that at some
Yeah,
point. Like
yeah,
we're
we'll,
gonna
we'll
get
talk
into
about that one later.
this. And I was like, oh, it's such a good story.
Yeah.
Back to Quest for the Hidden City.
Yeah.
They end up escaping, and obviously they find the cure, and the Republic they find a cure for this miner's curse, and the Republic are coming to give the clean energy source. And but last thing that we should really talk about is Rillick, the traitor,
Yeah.
begins to transform into one of these
Hmm.
creatures before they
He
leave
can
the
be cured.
planet.
Yeah.
And he thinks he's going to die when one of them charges him, and then it stops because it recognizes him at that point as one of
As
their
one of
own.
their own.
But
Yeah.
he still has his own sense of consciousness and self left. But he describes it as like he was bleeding, but instead of blood, he felt like this oily, rocky material, and he could no longer move his arms and legs. And had all of his senses about him, but no longer could control any of it, and could slowly. Rupert describes looking at him as like someone who was you could just see in his eyes, in a fight for survival for
Yeah.
himself. And that just to me seems like one of the worst possible ways
Oh, it's a
to
horrible
die.
fate. That's a horrible fate. I don't know how many people out there have read this particular set of comics, but there was what it reminds me of the most is there's a set of comics out there called Spider-Man Reign.
Okay.
And it's Peter Parker as an old man. This is relevant, I promise. I know this is a Star Wars show, but I promise
I'm
this is
ready.
relevant. But Peter Parker's an old man, and he's kind of given up being Spider-Man because Mary Jane died. It was his fault and all this stuff. And so he ends up putting the mask back on and coming back out of retirement, basically. But Doc Ock is still a villain in this, but Dr. Octavius is dead, and the arms are still moving and carrying his corpse around, basically. Like his arms are still alive, and he's fighting the arms of just the dead guy hanging from him. Like, and that's the only
So
thing I can
twisted.
really compare it to. But it was an awesome comic. It was great. But that's kind of what my brain was kind of
Yeah,
adding it to, is he see
I
all
get
this
that.
happening but couldn't stop it at all. Yeah.
It was a horrible way, but even in after he had betrayed them, he had tried to kill their
Yeah.
friends and others. He was responsible for the deaths of others. Rupert still saved him. And because the lives of anyone, she is the shield. No matter what, she is the shield for those who cannot help themselves. She is the shield for the innocent, and she is the shield for the guilty as well. And so I thought that was like a great way to show who the
Yeah.
Jedi are as well. Like they're not going to just easily could have said it's not worth the risk to run back out and try to save him when these creatures are trying to kill us. So I thought that was a great way to kind of end the book, and then they go back and there's a celebration, classic bat civilization
Yeah.
celebration. I wonder what that would look like. A bat party. I'm not really sure what that must have been like, but I bet that would have been pretty interesting. But
Yeah.
there was a couple things there was one thing I wrote down that's not related to the book or the story at all, but I thought was just really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Sandra talks about how she really wants to go back to Jeddah, make a pilgrimage to Jeddah,
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
enter into the Dome of Deliverance during the
Yes.
season of light to gaze upon the Kyber like structures,
Mirrors.
the
Yeah.
mirrors. Yes.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I wanted to look into like, what is the season of light? What is the Dome of Deliverance? What are these Kyber mirrors? Like, what is their history? I don't know why. I was like this random like lore search that I
It's
wanted to
interesting
get
as
into now.
crap. Yeah. I mean,
Mhm. It was just such an interesting thing. The Dome of Deliverance during the season of light and
yeah.
gaze upon the Kyber mirrors. And I'm like, is this still around? Was this destroyed? I'm feeling the Empire definitely tried to take that out, but who knows? We'll have to
Oh, it's
see.
gone
But
now.
it's got to be gone.
If Rogue One, it sucker's gone. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I guess yeah. Jeddah,
Yeah,
yeah,
it's gone. It
it's
gone.
gone.
Yeah.
Never mind.
Yeah. They
Maybe
were
they made a
beautiful
replica
mirrors.
somewhere. Maybe there's like a little what are those things called? Like a snow globe with the Dome of
Oh yeah.
Deliverance inside. You
Thrawn's
shake it
got one
up
in his
and
art display somewhere. And
you can shake it
yeah.
up and then like those little shiny Kyber mirrors around, and it's
Little Death
like
Star
this is
comes out.
now the season of light. Oh man. So last thoughts are George Mann cooks when he is given
I
Star
love
Wars
George
to
Mann,
write.
dude. I
And
love him.
if you are interested in hearing more from George Mann, you can check out an interview on our YouTube page where our very own Nate Manning from Star Wars Newsnet interviewed George and talked about the Eye of Darkness and other High Republican writing ventures of his. And it's great. So check that out
Yeah.
too. This is episode 4. We're going to be back next week. We're going to have a big comic edition next week. We are addicted to
We are
comics, but
addicted to him. Yeah.
it is
Yeah.
what happens when you get into the Star Wars lore like us.
Yeah.
But we're going to be, churning on. We're going to be talking about Porter Ingle next week for the first
Yeah.
time. The Blade of Bardato is one of my probably top 5 High Republic characters.
And we'll have
We
them
got
episodes back to back.
we got some one shots of some High Republic coming out, High Republic adventures. It's going to be a big week, stuff coming up in the future. Please like and subscribe to the YouTube channel. You can check this out on Spotify. We'll be on Apple Podcasts. We might be on Apple by the time you're listening to this. So you can check us out there. Brian, anything you want to say here before we get out of here?
No, not at all. I'm just really looking forward to next week talking about some comics. And before we get going, if you guys are listening to our show on Spotify, if you're watching this on Spotify, scroll on down a little bit, and there's a Q&A down there where you can send us your thoughts on this book. If you've read the book, don't worry about spoilers. We just basically broke the whole book down. So tell us what your thoughts were. If you've read this, let us know what you guys thought of it. And we'll go through and we'll read a couple of them on next week's show.
As always, Brian, for Light and Life, until next time.
Till next time, may the force be with you guys.